So welcome, Kirbee. Good morning.
It is very refreshing to think about the concept of abundance being talked about around the world today. It's really beautiful to explore that connectivity, but as you could probably tell, I like to do things a little bit different. So instead of just hopping into just talking about abundance on its own, I want to talk about nourishing an abundance mindset, because that's critically important. Because if you just kind of flirt around abundance, or you see other people having abundance, but you don't really have an optimal environment for abundance, that can be kind of painful, because you're like, I know it's possible, but I'm not quite there. So is it okay if we talk about nourishing an abundance mindset this morning? All right. And it's going to be highly interactive, so I hope you're ready. So this graphic, you're like, Kirbee, I was riding with you until this. What is this? So you're like, I like these people. These are my friends. But when we think about who's in the room with you, you've got some people who are lovely. You look great. But beyond the physical people who are here with you, I want to ask you another question. Who else is in the room with you? There's this part of us that has a negative voice. Mine likes to come about 15 minutes before an event that's like, you're going to be late. Or when you pull up and you flip down the mirror and you're like, have I always looked like this? And how am I going to fix it before I go in there? Or you're thinking, oh, I don't know anyone in the room. That voice. Or maybe deeper than that. When you've got a dream or an aspiration and you're really excited and you're starting to feel that spark again and you're like, that abundance that I've heard of, maybe a part of that can be mine. And that voice is like, tap me in. It's not for you. You've got this combination of things in your life that make abundance not really available to you. Do you remember what you did? Do you remember that degree that you don't have? Do you remember that degree that you have, but you really don't feel like you learned anything? Do you remember that relationship that's really fractured and broken? Abundance isn't for you. That voice, that person. I like to call mine Gertrude. That's her name. And sometimes I have to invite Gertrude to find the exit. So when I ask who's in the room with you, it's this version that makes you feel like this. It's that negative version, because when we're talking about abundance and nourishing an abundance mindset, those two aren't quite compatible. So it's a little fun, but it's also a really cool mind hack to give it a name, to give that voice a name, to give that persona a name, because then you can have a little bit more autonomy with it and you can ask them to leave. So let's have some fun together. Name your person. Name the one that makes you feel like this. Throw out a name, someone. Helga. Gertrude needs friends. What do we got? Helga. Helga's got to go.
Frank.
Martha. Frank. Okay, we're starting to like gather the troops. Who else? Throw a name out there. Diane. And if it's someone you know that you don't like, we all won't know it. It's fine. Don't feel guilty. We won't know. We won't know. Somebody else. Throw out a name. Because we've all had this feeling, right? Throw out a name. Oscar. Okay. Okay, so it's kind of funny to think about, but it really can detract away from us living a full and abundant life. When we coexist with this voice that causes us to shrink. We're like, okay, I'll go, but I won't show up fully. Okay, I'll write down some of those ideas or dreams that I have, but they'll live just in the journal. I won't really move forward with them. So while it's kind of funny to give it a name, it's really important so that you can realize that you have a little bit more autonomy. So can we collectively agree that we're going to invite Oscar, Martha, Gertrude, Helga, and the rest of our unnamed negative friends to find their way to the exit? Can we agree to that? So we are going to take a second, because we don't have a ton of time together. I wish it was an all-day conference. Maybe that'll come to fruition. We don't have a ton of time together, but before we go in, let's just do a few things. We made it through traffic. Some of you have been here since 7 a.m. setting up really beautiful things. Some of you left really hard things at home to go out into the world. Some of you checked one more email or text message before you got out of the car. That was like, this is waiting for me. So I like to really respect that and set the tone here. So if you trust me, I'll guide you if you can hear me. I invite you to close your eyes. Close your eyes, roll your shoulders back, roll them. Ooh, now let's try to roll them forward. And as you're doing that, kind of rotate your neck. And I'm going to scare you with a commercial on YouTube. That got your attention. I invite you to close your eyes again and listen to the words of this song. So good. So as we're listening and thinking about the words of that song, I invite you to take the deepest breath that you've taken all day. And at the top of that breath, I want you to think about that voice or those things that invite you to shrink, those things that invite you to think that abundance is elusive for you. And on the exhale, release. One of my favorite lines of that song says that she'll keep on walking until she's someone that you don't recognize. And I invite us into that experience where we keep going until we're someone that we don't recognize in that diluted state, because that's not who we are. So seeing ourselves in a new light, we've invited that negative person to leave. It leaves room and space to invite this abundance in. And as we move forward, I'm going to ask that we make a few agreements with one another. Is that fair? Does everyone have an ink pen? Or something to write with? I invite you can write in the notepad of your phone if you like. Now, you don't have to write these. You're like, geez, Kirbee, that's a lot. You don't have to write these, but we will hop into some writing exercises here shortly. But it's important to make these agreements with ourselves, because if we don't, then it's kind of like, yeah, it's just something I'm doing. But if you actually slow down and say, okay, I'm seeing myself in this new way, this new light, I'm going to make these agreements. So the first is, I will breathe deeply and often, clearing space for insights. You guys just did that. You breathe. You had some breaths with me. I'm open to recalibrate how I measure abundance. Can we agree to that together? I agree that joy, impact, passion, and purpose are more accurate predictors of abundance. Is that fair? Becoming great is an evolving process, not simply an endpoint. Can we agree to that one? Because many of us are chasing this, and elusive is the word of the day, this elusive endpoint, this feeling where we'll integrate, we'll feel validated, we've arrived. Newsflash, it'll never come, because it's a process. And so when we can embrace that, our point of view changes a bit. And the last agreement, I am worthy of fulfillment, release, and expansion. Not just me, all of us. Can we agree to that? Because when we're thinking about this concept of abundance, we are worthy of being fulfilled. But there's some things we're worthy of releasing, laying down, and expansion. So thank you for walking through those agreements. I'd love to hear from you. When you hear the word abundance, what comes up for you? Just throw out some things. Popcorn some words out here. Abundance. Money. Prosperity. Freedom. Plenty. Fulfillment. Opportunities. Family. Time. Ooh, okay. Flow. Ooh. More than enough. Some people in the back, because I see you too. Throw out some words. What are you feeling? Ease. Ooh. Opposite of scarcity, like the other side of the spectrum. Anyone over here? Abundance. What comes up? Confidence. Joy.
First world.
Yeah, first world. Huh.
Overwhelmed.
Oh, overwhelm. In a good way? I'd like to be overwhelmed in a good way, or overwhelmed in a not so good way.
Yeah, I don't know. Just sometimes
Okay.
a lot.
A lot.
It feels like
A lot. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's always good to talk about the other side of the coin.
Just kind of going off that, being able to manage when abundant things happen.
Yes. That's good. And if we have time, we'll unpack that a little bit more too, because sometimes we stay in our space because we've made these kind of false agreements that I'm not the right kind of person to manage abundance. If I were to get it, I wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. And it would be worse to have it and lose it or mismanagement, so I'm okay not having it. We'll talk more about that. All right. So if we were to get a more technical definition, abounding fullness of joy and strength for spirit, soul, and body. How does that feel? A contrast to feelings of lack, emptiness, and dissatisfaction. So all of that sounds pretty good. Sign me up. I'd like it. But how many of us have felt like this? Like we hear it, we know about it. Like I said, we kind of see it. Sometimes we get to touch it. But we feel like I'm here and abundance is over here, which almost can feel, again, a bit sad. Because it's like, I know it's possible, but I'm not there yet. So this is the spin that I wanted to take about abundance and nourishing an abundance mindset. Because how do you get from here to here? Let's build a bridge. And the reason why the concept of a bridge is really important is because sometimes you're going to be on this side of it, and then there'll be some times that you're going to find yourself back on the other side. But with that bridge, you have the autonomy to navigate. So let's build that bridge by nourishing an abundance mindset. Like I said, we don't have a ton of time here together, but hopefully the time that we do have empowers you to spend some more time with yourself, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So as we're writing and we're thinking about this concept of abundance and nourishing an abundance mindset, feelings are important. And I'm a recovering feelings fugitive. I would run from them. They were so inconvenient, sometimes sticky, and I just like to be effective and productive. But feelings are really, really important. So as we're going to walk through some of these writing prompts, I want to empower you with a tool to give you more specific language for those feelings so that we can nurture and nourish this abundance mindset. So you can take out your phone and scan this QR code, and this will give you this resource right on your phone. You can screenshot that or save the image. Because when we think about being really honest about some of these prompts, this language can help. Because, for example, let's just use fear. If you tell someone, I'm feeling fear, or if you tell yourself you're feeling fear, but really you're feeling insecure, or really you're feeling inadequate, sometimes their response or your method of going forward doesn't quite match it because you don't have adequate language. And my goal is after we leave here today that we have more tools and more honesty and more clear space for this abundance mindset. So getting really specific about your feelings is important. So your name is Elaine. So Elaine, I really like your dress. But if I came up to you and it was like, Evelyn, this dress is really great. Could you tell me more about it? Evelyn, and those shoes are great. The whole time I'm talking to you, you're going to be like, okay, this is weird. My name's not Evelyn. And you're distracted because I'm not calling you who you are. Same thing. Many of us navigate our days and we say, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm just a little off task. I'm a little distracted. I'm fine. And inside, all these feelings are like, is she calling me fine? Is he calling me fat? I'm not fine. And that's not fertile ground for an abundance mindset because there's this disconnect. So as we go through some of these writing prompts, I want you to have this resource on your phone so that you have more specific language. Permission. Whew. Permission. When we talk about nourishing an abundance mindset, the first thing that we're really going to walk through, and we're going to just write for a short period of time and invite you to continue this in your own time, permission. Sign your own permission slip. Because again, we're waiting for the right circumstance or person to say, you deserve it, I see you, here's what I've done for you. And on the outside of that, we feel like, well, I can't have it. So today, can we decide that we have permission? Permission to have abundance. And that's going to help our abundance mindset to say, you know what, from today forward, I've got the green light. Perhaps some of my actions, attitudes, habits, relationships have not supported me having an abundant life, but after today, it's all gas, it's go, because I give myself permission. So the first prompt that we're going to write about and you're welcome to take a picture or write it at the top of your paper, is today I give myself permission to. And then we're going to listen to a little music for a couple minutes as you write. Today I give myself permission to, and then we'll come back together. And then something I'd love you to think about is also what feelings came up when you first heard that prompt, because that's really important too, is really honoring what comes up, because sometimes it feels jarring or it feels kind of like deer in headlights. I don't know what I give myself permission to do. So yeah, I'd love you to think about what feelings came up when you heard that prompt initially, because I've written a book called Nourish. You may have seen it over in the marketplace. But when you're capturing your thoughts with the journal entries, I invite you to think about the feelings that come up, because sometimes that keeps us from exploring the thought fully, because we either feel inadequate, we feel scared, we feel overwhelmed when we hear some of these questions. So when we think about today I give myself permission to, who'd like to share kind of what came up and what you wrote? You had something I want to capture. Give yourself permission to.
The idea of
knock things
feeling,
over.
like, proud. I get really critical when I do things. So just like to be proud and accomplished and not only remember the bad parts or the things that went wrong.
So good.
When
And is it
putting an event together, perhaps like when you're at today.
Yeah, you're like, this is fresh. And would Oscar be telling you some of these things?
Perhaps.
Yeah, we asked Oscar to go. Oscar's like, dang it, she's telling my secrets. But all of this maps to this concept of really having autonomy, signing your own permission slip, and having your own form of abundance. It's so important. So good. All right, so our next prompt that we'll hop into, and like I said, I wish that we could be together all day, but we can't. We're going to talk about honesty. Because when it comes to abundance, how many of us have felt at some point in adulthood or even childhood, I can go back that far too, where perhaps we're living out a script that's not our own? And you're like, I'm in it. I'm getting up every day. I'm doing the things, but this isn't me. This is not what I want. This is not what lights me up. However, in deference to being a team player, to being a good family member, I'm going to keep doing these things. And meanwhile, I'm going to keep being less and less honest with myself. I got to an interesting point in my life, which led to me this writing project, where that concept of being dishonest with myself started to get really, really uncomfortable. It started to fester. And I had to really look at my belief that being dishonest with myself kind of saved me. Like, no, I don't really want that. I'm fine. I'm good. Because you thought, we can just kind of play in this safe space. Meanwhile, the part of me that was calling is like, nope, absolutely not. I will not accept this. And it started to manifest itself in different ways. It can have physical manifestations. It can all types of things. So what I learned out of that, even if it makes other people uncomfortable, honesty with yourself is really, really important. And it's kind. And when you're honest with yourself and you're living that full, wide life, that's an act of service to everyone around you, not living as this diluted version of yourself. So I'm going to share one of my favorite quotes as we lead into this next prompt, because you might be like, well, Kirbee, in these other parts of the world, their abundance talks might be a little lighter than ours. Maybe. But my goal is that you leave out of here with a very personal relationship with abundance. Not the fluff, not the cotton candy version. I want to offer you a meal. I want to offer you something that's sustaining. So, honesty. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The latter procedure, however, is disagreeable and therefore not popular. What does that mean to someone? Give me your view on that quote. Absolutely. So all of that dishonesty with ourselves, all of that, I'm fine, it's fine. I really hate when they do that, but it's fine. This dream that's inside of me is so big, but doing the same mundane thing day after day, it's fine. Because we don't want to dive into those parts that feel sticky and uncomfortable and dark. But that's how we become enlightened. And so in this next prompt, that's a lead-in. as we're going into this abundance mindset where we can have more freedom and being on our own terms and being really clear, we're going to explore getting really honest about one of my favorite topics: jealousy. Jealousy can be a brilliant indicator. And I heard a sound over here when I said jealousy, and that's how we feel. And like I said, in the book project, I offer you space to capture how do you feel when you read the prompt. Because I don't want you just to jump right into the prompt. So feel free to use that feelings wheel. Because sometimes when you think about jealousy, you feel shame, weight. You feel like, I'm not jealous, because we've all been taught to be content and package it up. But what if just for the next 2 minutes we change our relationship with jealousy? What if we invite jealousy to the table as a teacher? What if we remove the shame from it? And here's what I know for sure about jealousy. None of us have to practice being jealous. None of us. You can see a happy couple. You can see someone excelling in their career. Or it could be something simple and it just wells up inside of you. Jealousy is a primal thing. And I believe anything that's primal is an excellent teacher. It doesn't have all the facades that we put on. And so let's invite jealousy to the table as a teacher, something that maps to something that we actually need. So let's put the shame down and then let's get curious. So for the next couple of minutes, I'd love you to answer this prompt. Let's get really honest. I feel jealousy when? And we're going to just write about that for a couple of minutes. And like I said, I know we don't have all day together, so we'll explore this a little bit more. It's one of my favorite songs. It says, I may not be perfect, but I'm divine. Isn't that a powerful reminder? There's a circle every Wednesday at Thistle Farms that I go to before we hop into volunteering, and the reading this week was just this concept of holding brokenness and divinity together. That song really is helpful and kind of dovetails into what we're talking about with jealousy. Before we get to your response about it, who wants to share? Feel free to use your wheel. What feelings came up? You're like, oh, Kirbee, I was not expecting this on a Friday morning. But what feelings came up when you initially heard that prompt? Threatened. Insecure. It's very vulnerable, right? Anyone else? Judgmental. Of yourself?
Yes.
I said shame.
Shame. Anxiety. Yeah, we have this really complicated relationship with something that came in our base kit. We all have it. So what if we can heal that relationship and say, you know what, I put down the shame and I'm willing to learn what you're trying to teach me. I'm willing to learn what's tied to that primal response, because if I pay attention to it, perhaps I'll feel more integrated and whole, because you keep coming up because you're trying to tell me something. So would someone like to share the response? And I know this one can get a little personal. For me, I know there's definitely some complicated feelings tucked in this, but I felt so much release and relief when I allowed myself to admit what I already knew. So hopefully we can take that journey together. I saw your hand. Go on. You?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know I raised it, but I can say it.
Maybe it
I feel
was.
jealousy when I'm not inspired or stimulated.
And you see others inspired and stimulated. So good. And so what does that open up for you?
It opens up like a need to feel like I need to do more, even when I'm already probably doing enough, to overcompensate, or just kind of get in my head a bit more.
And it's so interesting because when we can name these things, it helps us navigate more fully. Thank you for sharing that. Someone else. I feel jealousy when. Yes, exactly. And that is so important. That's why I love to explore this one, because many of us shy away from that, because when you see a happy couple or someone in the park with their dog, or you see someone who posted their win on Instagram and you feel that, we cover it up because you're like, am I a terrible human? Why do I feel this way? I really do love them. And we shy away from the lesson. And that ruins many relationships. Because sometimes when we start to feel jealousy, we put in distance, or we throw jabs, or we say things, or we treat someone differently because we haven't gotten curious. But if we could decouple that and say, I just want to be more myself, then that kind of pulls you into someone who is more themselves versus creating that distance. But because we feel like let me separate myself because I don't want you to smell the stench of jealousy on me because I'm not a terrible person. It really complicates relationships. So I think it's something worth exploring. One more person. I feel jealousy when, and thank you for sharing that because like I said, this one's vulnerable, but this is all attached to our real abundant lives for ourselves. And so it's really interesting because that little voice in our head, and sometimes a big voice in our head, can tell us it's too late. The cost you paid for your decisions, that's where, it's not true. It's not true. But being able to explore it kind of opens new capacity. And it really leans us toward the direction of who we really are and what we really want. And then being able to borrow those things, borrow from our past versions and thank them and build on them versus feel like it's something that we're dragging through life and we're having to overcompensate. It's like, what if I took these bricks that I'm dragging and started to stack them on top of one another? Because for sure, knowing you and knowing just a snippet of your story, when you get to where you want to go, whether that's title, position, whatever you're doing, your experience is going to be so much more enriched by what you've gone through, and the bridge you'll be able to create for other people is going to be unparalleled. I know that for sure. So please start stacking those bricks instead of feeling like it's something you have to drag behind you. Thank you for sharing that. I know our time is winding up together, but we can't leave without doing something that sparks a little bit of joy. It's part of abundance too. But hopefully you see kind of how this all weaves together to having a more authentic conversation. Because for me, there was a point in my life that kind of spurred the writing of the book and all of the things now where I had a cracking wide open with a personal tragedy. I had a great career in healthcare, was building this lifestyle brand, and then got a phone call that would shift my life and my family's life forever. My parents were in a tragic car accident here in Nashville, and then that thrust me into this role of being a full-time caregiver for someone who now has a traumatic brain injury and is paralyzed. All of us can relate, perhaps not to that story, but those moments where you're looking at the pieces of your life shattered. It's almost like that beautiful glass Christmas ornament that you're putting on and it hits the ground and you're like, whoa, I can't recover this. It'll never be the same. And that's the place where I found myself looking at this. All the time that I'd put into creating all these different things in my life, all these hopes, these dreams, kind of felt like they couldn't come to fruition. But what that tragedy allowed me to do was get really honest with myself. And I offer that to other people because there's another quote that I love that says, adversity introduces a man or a woman to themselves. And that's so true. Because whether you've been through something similar to what I have experienced or your own tragedy, all of the money, the titles, the accolades kind of fade away and it's you and you. That's it. And so if you don't know you really well, if you don't know abundance on your own terms, if you don't know what lights you up, if you don't know what makes you jealous and you're like, I'm going to go after that because I deserve that, then you can find yourself leading this life that's not truly authentic. And then when you intersect with something that shakes all of those fake things off, you realize the time can't be recovered. So I invite people into this experience from today forward. Let's lead a more authentic life that maps to this abundance that's really true for you on your own terms. So we're going to talk about joy. I feel most myself when. And so we're going to write on that, and that'll be the last one that we talk about. I've got a couple others that I'll have you take pictures of and continue the conversation. So I feel most myself when. And I want to make sure I give you all time to shop and do all the things. So we'll hop in. Does anyone want to share what came up? What I feel most myself when. That could be you're in a place, what you're doing, what you're not doing. What came up for you? I feel most myself when. Yes. You set out to do it and you did it. Yep. And it reminds you who you are because you are that person. You're a finisher. I love that. Someone on this side. I feel most myself when.
When I'm with like-minded people.
When you're with like-minded people. That's a beautiful segue. I love it. When you're with like-minded people. And when you think about this, this is really your own joy on your own terms. And the reason why I put this prompt with joy, sometimes we're like, well, I should say I feel joyful when I'm taking in stray cats. Does that make me a good person? No. I want you to explore what makes you feel most yourself, and that is tied to your own joy. And when we can actually name that and spend more time in that, could we agree that abundance soon follows? So a couple of these that I'll invite you to take a picture of. Nourishing an abundance mindset also really comes to play when you have ritual with yourself. How many of us get up and before your feet hit the ground, you feel behind? And you're like, how are we going to make up the time? How are we going to do this? And you kind of start the day off in the red. You already feel like, okay, here's what I'm going to say when I get there to explain why I'm late. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's how I'm going to work really hard to be super efficient to show that I'm worthy, and that 35 minutes I was late, don't remember that. We start the day off in the red, and we don't often have time for ritual with ourselves. I'm not naturally a morning person, but I've had to find these pockets of time, whether that's in the morning, midday, putting my phone on Do Not Disturb, to have ritual with myself. Because like I said, that quote that says, adversity introduces a man or woman to themselves. And what hurts really badly is if you get in a space like that and you're sitting with yourself and it's a stranger. And so having ritual with yourself and really getting to know yourself and delight yourself and allow yourself a place for those sticky, kind of uncomfortable feelings is really important. So I invite you to take a picture of this and write about this on your own time. Here's how I would like to show up for myself. What ritual would you like to introduce for yourself? In the very beginning of Nourish, there are 3 pages of all types of accessible rituals, because when you're in a place that's tough, the last thing you want to hear is, here's a 6-month program to feeling better. You're like, well, there's that. But it's like there's small accessible rituals that you can do and help you to come home to yourself. That's the subtitle of the book, Nourish, A Guide to Coming Home to Yourself. Guardrails. This is really important too, and I invite you to take a picture of this prompt. Nourishing an abundance mindset requires guardrails. Sometimes we can get in a space or a conversation or the way someone looks at you or the way you feel about a project, you can have a very slippery thought. Has anybody ever felt that way? Like you're having a pretty good day and then something happens and you're like, I'm terrible and I failed at it all. Like you can get there really, really quickly. And then you feel kind of like, am I just unstable? Let me just tell you, that's real life. That's all of us. I tell people I don't have good days and bad days. It's like, we're just ride the wave by 20-minute increments. But you have to have some guardrails in place to remind yourself what's really true. So I'd like you to, in your own time, write about, here's how I can support myself. So when you find yourself in one of those situations, maybe it's a tense conversation or maybe it's something that didn't go the way that you want, how am I going to support myself to come back to the middle, to come back to what I know is true before I go too far? And that's important when we're talking about abundance, because you cannot have an abundance mindset when you're constantly living on the edges. They're just not compatible. And the last prompt I invite you to take a picture of is about community. Here's what I need from community. Because to nourish an abundance mindset and to actually experience abundance, we need to operate in community. And you all have found a beautiful community here. All right. So I'd love for you to connect. You can scan this QR code and it will take you out to all the things. Because this conversation just started here. It doesn't end here. But before we close, I'd like to invite you, again, after you kind of, you scan it and you'll see my face spin around on your phone. It's kind of an interesting thing. And then it will it'll take you out to a few different ways for us to connect with one another. Before we leave, I invite you one more time, because it's a safe place. Let's close our eyes. Let's take the deepest breath we've taken all day. Let's roll your shoulders back. Let's roll your neck around, because we agreed to breathe and clear space for insights. And let's remember those agreements that we made at the very beginning. Because you're worthy of freedom, release, and expansion. Thank you so much for spending time with me this morning, and hopefully we're all in a better place to nourish an abundance mindset. Thank you.